I'm not saying this to any one of us specifically, but I am kind of saying this to all of us. It's time to accept that they hate us. It's time to accept that debate will always be inaccessible, and that the notion that debate will ever not be a normalizing process, not something that at least makes us hate ourselves, at least a little bit on the inside as disabled people, something that is patently false. What do we say to the disabled high school debaters? What do we say to the disabled people in general that think about joining debate? That debate might not be fucked up to you, that debate might not cause violence, that debate might not microaggress against you. These things are all patently false, and the app is way too optimistic about these questions, which is not to say that we should not try. It's to say that we must always accept that they hate us, but rather move around them, use different strategies, don't engage with the violent rhetoric, but rather still use showing our stratagems, different ways of trying to defend them. Because debate as a community will always trust us, or when we're trying to talk about disability, will always find ways to do it exclude us. That anytime that it tries to say that it's doing these things, it will always just pivot and do it for another access. Look, all of their arguments about how debate could be accessible are just patently false, because it always creates trade-offs, because debate or disability is an ontological position that is in opposition to civil society. Anything that is predicated on that existence will always already be damaging for disabled people. That things like quiet rooms are still way too bright for me as a person. That the 1AC from a team that is supposed to be one of the most acceptable is still slightly different, which means that we don't get links to arguments. That when straight-up teams go slower, they just highlight less and rate the same number of cards, which still makes it hard for me to comprehend, or they just take out the offensive cards, which means that we don't get as many links to arguments. Debate still always pushes disability into the opposite of these things. And look, you're saying that you love everyone is just patently false. I know that there are critics that we both strike, as well as the fact that well, I certainly don't love my abusers. Yes, I have to work with them sometimes, but that does not mean I should be forced to love or educate them. That I should be able to hide that my cripness is something that I should not be forced to explain to people, which is what the app is doing. They are the super crips that explain to all the able-bodied people why it's okay to do so. Look, I don't know how many times I've been told to look at UNLV BS's wiki, because they are supposed to be the ideal disabled debaters. People like Eric who were also the super crip, that however he was still unable to be a national champion as an ND when he was running disability arguments. This always recreates the fact that, look, we will never always be national champions. I don't think I'll ever be able to beat Northwestern in the finals of the NDT, because they'll just out-tech me, but that does not mean that I don't have value, which is the point of our argument, that there's more things, that cripness, the negativity involved with it, the anti-socialness is magnificent. It's something beautiful, more going on there, that we don't need to force everyone to educate ourselves, but rather that we need to force them to deal with our objection, deal with our difference, turn your back on fitting in, on being part of social citizenship. Disability is always the outside, the limits of society. Cripness changes our relationship to the violent present by saying this world is never enough, it is always already too violent. Accepting our status as abject allows us to imagine a future in which inclusion is unnecessary, because exclusion never happened in the first place. This is Campbell and 12. What if we turned our backs on fitting in? What would be the opportunities, the consequences, maybe dangers to give attention to live intricacies of embodiment, offering alternatives to normalization efforts that aimed at homogenizing social outsiders, not negating disability, can cultivate alternative kinds of liberty that de-identify with the rhetoric of social inclusion. The cripping of contemporaneous is the grasping and holding tight to ambivalence and obscurity so fundamental to the alternative lifestyle, which is obtained through fixing the gaze not on our era's light but the underbelly. The reimagining of disability or crypto-horizon, a future without the state of ableism, although elusive and out of grasp, is nonetheless fundamental in order to move to hopefulness and capture the unlived possibility in the lives of many with disability. Ableism is founded on the utopian humanities of the desirable and disgusting. It is therefore necessary to inculcate alternative political imaginations within the life cycle of Western human subject. Long periods of stability are considered to be desirable, and people who live in rapid bursts are characterized as immaturity and dangerous. Trip time can be staggered, frenzied, coded, and mandarin. The distance between two events. Some of our time is shaped according to another's to insurgency time. Relinquishing the norm is lost cause enables an outflowing of beingness that is antisocial. The disabled life puts out fear and possibility. This is conflict over liminality that many disabled people experience. Disabled people are in fact strangers in ableist homelands who, because of their strangeness, have the possibility of a new vision or orientation. We are outsiders. We really are. We can never be insiders. Those who think they're insiders may end up being outsiders. Why don't they realize that? That's the point we are trying to make. To step outside the normative trajectories of negativity not only destabilizes the conception of disability, but also confuses and disrupts the process of subjectification by confronting the goodness of disability. And cripness works against assimilation normalcy. No, it allows us to quit working ourselves to death and relish in the abstract, noting our connection to each other in this space, creating disability consciousness, which is the internal link to all the AFARs. Pankett and 14. Disability politics leads the way in thinking about alternatives to neoliberal ableist capitalism. Disability subjectivities creates new forms of embodied knowledge and collective consciousness, and disabled people's interdependencies provide alternative ethical maps for living together outside of, even in opposition to the dictates of normalcy. Could care rather than work being a place to find identity and recognition. Why wear yourself out? Disability provides a moment to intervene and slow death. Why work yourself to death? Cripness is infused with negativity, yet we do not always see it as such. The rich archive of labor of crip failure is here and at hand, but do we as the crip community celebrate those crip failures that can sustain our visions of utopia and whose negative energies move us towards the crip horizon? These crip horizons by be found as disability simultaneously for and against slow death. Our argument is that we are failures, the failure to be normal, the failure to be the ideal subject that they want to see still presents. Their arguments are all examples of liberal inclusion, that people like Northwestern will inevitably care about disability, and they need this education because they will become disabled. But where do we just prioritize this education simply for the fact that disabled people are being hurt? It's all the arguments are always assuming a subject that cares about disability, that is rational or at least self-interested, rather than somebody that's interconnected and trying to work through these things. We can be your caretakers because we want you to be or because you want us to help you too. That is not how it should be, because certain bodies need way less help than others, and the notion that debate will always, and everyone cares for everyone equally is just patently false, especially in the debate. You and look, walk in their shoes that rub and pinch and blister, the debate that makes me feel terrible, that walking around in tournaments a day still feels inaccessible to me because my ankles tilt in and they end up hurting too much. And however, how do I request an accommodation for that? Because I can still move rooms and I still don't experience pain all of the time, but where does that accommodation come in? Debate itself is always going to be causing pain to disabled people. The AF survival strategy imagines a world without pain, without these problems happening. However, I don't think there's an articulation of how they achieve that. They just say that we change debate. However, I'm not sure when you do that besides raise disability consciousness, as well as educate able-bodied people, and as well as the education of able-bodied people still patently failing in the debate community. I still hear judges tell people to say people with autism instead of autistic person. I still hear critics say words like stupid, dumb, and idiot, which are some of the most triggering words for me personally, because I have a historical instance of the violence associated with those words. However, I don't know how to change those things, because debate just views it as unimportant rhetoric, as well as debate is always about the judging of intelligence, the judging of how you engage, which is why we need to accept that they hate us, that debate itself is not made for all disabled people. And yes, it might be okay to engage, because I do enjoy learning about these things. I do enjoy these radical discussions, but to ignore the hate that always comes along with it, especially with the losses, especially with the notions where I don't feel good enough, or I don't feel like my argument was as intelligent as the judges like. When judges make rude comments, these are all things that always recreate the hate, because it always holds myself up to this able-bodied standard. You can extend through our Tony Rodenberg evidence that inclusion was always predicated on exclusion in the first place, which is why they can never actually resolve any of their impacts. It's always on inclusion. It literally always is accommodations in response to inaccessible things, rather than because disability always is in opposition to civil society. Embracing the abject, embracing the cripness allows us to, rather than just say hope for a better world, but rather embrace the way in which we are always actively resisting civil society, always making it conform to us, doing things like being activists and saying, no, I need you to slow down is a good example of this. It's not an example of being included, rather it's a way of us trying to disrupt normative debate. And they say that the blind can't lead the blind. This is patently untrue. Disabled people can lead each other. They have specific notions of bodily ability that always get reinforced. Why can't Crips always be leading with other Crips? Why can't we have our own separate communities? Why do we always have to educate everyone else? The inclusion of non-disabled folks within their movement, that they love everyone, always recreates the violence from those that cause us the worst pain.
So, what limits were you looking for that you couldn't get because you changed a couple of letters?
The ballots, a referendum on life and death,
what
access.
did you want to link to?
Right, that debate will always be a referendum on that, and that disabled populations then are always rendered dead, which I think is still true in the world of debate. I suppose it would be kind of as well as there's a
You were looking for like a more specific link. It seems like we've gotten to that debate anyway, right?
I mean, I'm not entirely sure. If you went on a no link, then I feel like that's an example. But two is that the access to political citizenship was another huge one that we were going to.
Right, but we read all the warrants and the Sievers evidence about access to political citizenship, even though we didn't say it in the card, so, in the tagline, right? So I'll apologize that my tags were slightly different than what were on the wiki. That's just totally my fault, like
It's
completely
okay. I mean,
100% my fault.
but that's just an example of how a debate's gonna, feel really shitty. That actually always kind of change things up a little bit. That debate is not something that can overcome microaggressions, right?
So how did we define winning as what makes debate good?
I'm not articulating that you do that, but I think that the engagement with debate, as well as that's probably a referendum on life or death argument that we would have gone for a link to. As well as that's more of just an explanation of why negativity, of embracing the fact that I won't be an NDT champ is super important.
I won't be an NDT champ either.
Cool.
That's never
But
gonna
I
happen.
mean, in some of our conversations that we've had, you told me to be more line by line and techie because that's how you win those big debates.
Sure.
I don't want to do that.
Okay, all right. So we can disagree fundamentally on those things and still, be interested in the same goals, right?
I mean, I think the goal's a little bit different. The goal of the one I see still appears to be inclusion rather than kind of breaking down the system in the first place.
Right. So how would you define the alternative then in the world of the TNC?
Crypt negativity, that's accepting that they hate us.
Okay, and what does that do to resolve the fact that they hate us or the internalization?
I mean, it accepts that disability will always be viewed as a negative, but there's something magnificent beyond these social articulations that disabled people can have these experiences that don't match up with social norms, but there's still something valuable, especially as we as disabled people come into.
Alternative prescribe some sort of other community that we should escape to / go to / be in instead of here?
Any community except this one.
Any community instead of this one would be less ableist than this one?
I don't think there is a community explicitly in the status quo. Maybe like a crypt negative community could work. I think that the second
like
piece
what
of
Chandler's talking about with crypt communities and stuff like that?
but I definitely don't think that happens in debate because it is attached to an institution and inclusion of things like PAS in the topic clearly shows what
I'm
people
pissed about PAS in the topic too.